Have you ever wondered how does a computer processes things such as typings on the keyboard? Well, that's what a CPU does. A CPU, or Central Processing Unit, is a device in the computer that provides processing power to the computer to function. So basically, a CPU is like our brains. Without a CPU, the computer or the device cannot function. So here I have a photo of a CPU because I don't have a CPU actually on hand. So basically this is the front part of the CPU and this is the back part of the CPU. So the back part has over hundreds of pins that you insert directly onto the middle of the motherboard, and it will work as long as everything on the computer is plugged up correctly. So what is a CPU made out of? A CPU is made of roughly 90% silicon, because silicon is a very common material on Earth, and it is also a semiconductor, meaning that it can conduct electricity with certain situations and it cannot conduct electricity in other situations. So a CPU is made of over millions of transistors, which the amount of transistors in a CPU determines the processing power of the CPU. So, what is a transistor? A transistor is a very, very small semiconductor that regulates current and voltage flow throughout the CPU. They can amplify electrical signals and offer high switching speeds, roughly about 100 billion on and off cycles per second, which is known as binary. So, how does a CPU actually functions with this binary that you so speak of? Well, CPU understands a language known as binary code, which is a series of ones and zeros or ons and offs. The CPU uses the binary to execute tasks inputted by a user. So if you were to type on a keyboard, say hi or something, the computer translate that into binary, and the CPU does its task to understand what has been typed and display it onto a screen. And the ALU, or the arithmetic logic unit, performs the actual tasks that was inputted by said user. So these instructions that you put into the computer, how does the CPU execute said tasks and stuff, right? So the CPU actually takes the instruction that we input into the computer, aka us typing onto the computer. They store it into memory. The CPU then fetches the instructions that we put into memory and decodes the instructions into binary and directs the data directly to the ALU. Now I have a visual representation of this. Basically, we have our main memory right here. We input, like, say for instance, K. We input K into the computer. They store that instruction that we inputted something in the keyboard into the main memory. Now after that, the CPU then fetches that instruction that we just inputted and take it over to the control unit, and which the control unit decodes the instruction and basically converts it to binary so the computer can understand it. Now, this binary then gets sent to the ALU, which executes the actual command, and finally the command loops all the way back into the memory so it can be stored. So, after all that is done, then the task is complete and the cycle continues on and on and on. So, basically, the CPU is the most powerful part of the device or the computer because it actually combines all the parts together and processes inputs and tasks that the computer has to go through. The CPU processes everything in like storing storing instructions into memory, fetches the instructions, decoding them, turning into binary, and sending the binary to ALU, and the ALU stores the task that had just been completed into the main memory. So basically, this is how a CPU functions and processes things such as keyboard typings. Now, there's a lot more to explaining how does a CPU work, but this is basically just the basic level of how does a CPU work. Thank you.